Most people think that the South set about with a determined effort to establish slavery in the North American continent. Quite the opposite is true. Virginia, for example, was one of the early states, at that time a colony, to attempt to prohibit the slave trade and to prevent the establishment of slavery in the southern colonies. The South had a very unique and early role in the prohibition against slavery. While still a British colony, Virginia petitioned the British Crown to end the nefarious slave trade in Virginia, thereby becoming the first American colony to go on record as being against the nefarious slave trade. The British and their New England friends, they were slave traders, and they were gaining huge fortunes from the nefarious slave trade, and therefore convinced the British Crown to ignore Virginia's petition to prohibit the slave trade. And be sure to note that it was the pursuit of profit that motivated New England colonies to resist this first effort to prohibit the African slave trade. Virginia's legislature, their colonial legislature, passed a bill to at least limit the importation of slaves, but the governor refused to sign the bill. And remember, at that time, as a colony, the governor was not elected, he was appointed by the Crown. But note the wording of Virginia's complaint. It says, quote, "The importation of slaves hath long been considered a great inhumanity and a pernicious commerce," end quote. Over the span of 73 years, Virginia's legislature passed 23 resolutions or bills in an effort to prohibit or at least limit the slave trade. Soon after Virginia seceded from its union with Great Britain in 1776, its General Assembly passed a law prohibiting the slave trade within the sovereign state of Virginia, and Governor Patrick Henry gladly signed the bill. This was done October 15, 1778, 10 years before Massachusetts and 30 years before Great Britain acted to prevent the nefarious slave trade. In 1760, South Carolina attempted to limit the slave trade within that colony, but again, the efforts of the people were nullified by the British Crown. The colony of Georgia was the first American colony to adopt a constitution prohibiting the importation of slaves. North Carolina passed a law in 1782 that allowed slave owners to free their slaves if they agreed to support all the aged, infirmed, and children that were to be set free. In other words, the Georgia legislature would not allow slave holders to abandon the sick and those who could no longer work. In 1828, Mississippi, which at that time was a frontier region of the United States, but its territorial governor, Bernard Brandon, declared that slavery is an evil at best. In 1832, Constitution of Mississippi placed a limit on the importation of slaves into the state. There were early abolition societies in the South. By 1827, there were 130 abolitionist societies in the United States, of which 106 were in the slave states of the South. Southern efforts died out in the early 1830s as the Northern abolitionist movement was overtaken by Northern radicals. These Northern radicals proclaimed that all Southerners, slaveholders and non-slaveholders alike, were evil and should be destroyed. They were actively promoting a Haiti-type slave insurrection in the southern states in which whites, men, women, children, and infants would be massacred. John Brown was supported and praised by influential northern intellectuals and politicians. This was the effort that destroyed the southern abolition movement. Nat Turner's revolt, in which over 50 white men and women and children were massacred, plus the North's support of radical extremists such as John Brown, was what caused the end of the active abolition movement in the South in the 1830s. Fear of a slave revolt in the South was real because in many counties the South had fewer whites than blacks. As Thomas Jefferson said, slavery was like holding a wolf by the ears. You really don't want to hold the wolf, but you dare not turn him loose. The peaceful abolition of slavery required calm and reasonable efforts by men of goodwill. But by the late 1830s, it was becoming clear that the North would use slavery as a political leverage against the South.
Every cultural and ethnic group in America today is encouraged to display pride in their heritage, except Southerners. Sadly, the heritage and rights of Southerners have been relegated to the trash heap of liberal PC society. Justice requires equality and fair play for the South. After all, Southern rights matter. We insist on justice for all Southerners who wore the gray, black or white, during the War for Southern Independence, and justice for their descendants. The Sons of Confederate Veterans is a non-political Southern heritage organization defending the good name of all honorable Southerners. Check out our website and join us in this noble endeavor.